I boarded the plane quietly, like I always did. No fanfare, no eye contact, just the weight of my carry-on and the press of passengers behind me. First class wasn't new to me, but I never dressed the part. Faded jeans, a plain t-shirt, jacket slung over my arm. No designer labels, no watch screaming for attention. That's the thing about having status. You don't need to prove it. My seat was 2A, and there she was, 2B. Clara. Of all the planes, all the flights, it had to be this one. She didn't look up right away, too busy fussing with her scarf and chatting with the woman next to her. But when she did, our eyes met. 5 years of silence collapsed into that 1 second. No greeting, just that look. I gave a nod. She looked through me. I slid into my seat. Silence pressed between us like a third passenger. Then she laughed, loud enough to draw glances from nearby seats. "You know," she said to the woman beside her, voice honeyed with cruelty, "he probably used miles to upgrade. Always the scrappy one, right?" Her voice wasn't angry. It was amused. She was performing. The woman next to her gave a polite smile, uncertain. Clara kept going, her words just sharp enough to cut, just soft enough to pass as banter. His father used to say he had potential. I guess points are the only thing he's banking these days. A flight attendant approached. She looked at me, hesitated, then gave a small, respectful nod. "Welcome back, Mr. Ford." That tiny moment, a flicker of recognition, confused Clara. Her face shifted, not enough for the world to notice, but I saw it. I walked off the plane with no desire to glance back. Clara trailed behind me, making small talk like nothing had happened up there. Her voice had lost its edge. Now it sounded almost polite. Almost. But I wasn't interested in polite. I didn't respond, not a word. I just kept moving through the terminal, past the artificial smiles and overpriced coffee. As I stepped off the jet bridge, I loosened my tie and let the cool Pacific air hit me. It was brisk, always is out here, a kind of chill that doesn't hide what it is, unlike people. 3 years ago, I sat in her house on Thanksgiving. Clara's estate, white stone, sweeping staircase, pretentious candle centerpieces. The kind of place that looks like it's lived in by a catalog, not real people. I had been invited out of formality, one of those "we should include him" obligations. They sat me near the kitchen door, close enough to catch the draft every time the staff walked through, far enough from the center of the table to know my place. Her son, Chase, raised his wine glass halfway through dinner and smirked. "To family," he said loud enough for all to hear, even the parts that don't quite fit. Laughter trickled around the table. No one looked at me. I smiled, nodded, didn't flinch. That was the last holiday I ever attended with them. After dessert, I caught Clara slipping a folder back into her purse near the coat closet. It must have fallen out. I saw my name on the corner of a letter, just a first name, handwritten in my father's distinct script. It stopped me cold. I picked it up. She tried to snatch it back, muttering, "You weren't meant to see that." Inside was a letter from my father, dated just weeks before he passed. In it, he detailed his hopes for me to manage the family's charitable foundation. He believed I could bring integrity back into it, that it needed someone who still believed in something. Clara had buried it. She told the board I wasn't financially literate enough, that I wouldn't understand real money. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just quietly folded the letter, put it in my coat pocket, and drove home in silence. Today, standing outside that same airport, the weight of that night sat just behind my ribs. There's a quote I once read in a dog-eared book at a used bookstore in college: "The worst betrayal comes wrapped in quiet smiles and fine china." I stopped fighting because I knew how that house worked. It wasn't built for me. But now, I've learned how to play their game. My driver, a middle-aged guy with a Dodgers cap and a tired voice, looked at me through the rearview mirror as we pulled onto the highway. "You in town for business or pleasure?" I hesitated. "Sort of business," I said. I'm here to finish something that was stolen." He let out a low whistle. "Hope you get it back, brother." I nodded. "Me too." Funny how a stranger can see you clearer than your own blood. At the hotel, I moved with quiet purpose, no hesitation, no wasted steps. I spread out my files across the desk, not just the letter, but years of correspondence, financial reports, board votes, every thread Clara had pulled to keep me out. There was a sealed envelope marked Board Review, inside the truth. I opened my laptop. A folder named Backbone lit up the screen. Inside, names, transfers, dates, photos. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for correction. Because sometimes the only way to balance the scales is to stop pretending they were ever level. And then I saw it on the homepage of the Foundation's website. My last name. Still there, still in use. They'd been using it like a seal of credibility, while keeping me out like a liability, but not anymore. I sat alone in the hotel's business center long after the last guest had gone upstairs. The hum of the vending machine and the soft hiss of the HVAC filled the room. My laptop screen glowed in front of me, 3 drafted emails lined up like loaded bullets. Each one told a truth I had hidden for years. Truths about the Foundation, about Clara, about the people who had quietly profited while wearing the mask of family. My index finger hovered over the send button, not out of fear, out of discipline. Timing mattered more than rage. I tapped my phone, replaying the voice memo I'd saved the night before. My father's voice, steady and warm. "I trust you to correct the course if I'm ever not here." It wasn't just a promise, it was an assignment. In the past, I would have reacted. Now, I planned. A year ago, I was still playing their game without realizing the rules had been rewritten. I remembered walking into the gala at the Fairmont, smiling at donors, shaking hands, nodding at board members. One of the new members, a man who'd only just joined, leaned over during cocktails and said, "Sorry you missed the vote last month. Must have been tough." I froze. Smile still plastered on my face. "What vote?" He blinked, confused. "The leadership review. Clara said you weren't interested in attending." My drink tasted like metal. I nodded, made a polite excuse, and walked away. They'd turned my absence into apathy, my silence into disinterest. That was the night I stopped believing I could wait them out. Last night, digging through public records, I found what I hadn't even known to look for: a quiet transfer of the Foundation's assets into a new trust. No announcement, no board minutes, a paper shell hidden under a real estate LLC with a bland name. I clicked open the PDF and stared. The trust code included my birth date, embedded as numbers in the middle of a random string. It was a fingerprint of malice. They weren't just stealing, they were mocking me. I printed the document, sealed it in an envelope, proof of what she'd done, ready for the first move. This morning, instead of blasting the truth, I chose precision. I opened a new email to Mrs. Klein, one of the oldest board members, someone who once told me over tea, "You remind me of my grandson. He fights quiet but smart." I attached the document, wrote one line. "You'll know what to do with this." That was it. No accusations, no fireworks. Silence crafted into a blade. Because when silence is intentional, it cuts deeper than shouting. I leaned back, remembering another moment. 2 years ago, a phone call before the annual gala. I had asked Clara why I wasn't on the panel. Her tone was syrupy, practiced. "It's not really your scene, sweetheart. You're better behind the curtain." That line had burned into me. Behind the curtain. Like I was stagehand in her play. It was never about wanting their spotlight. It was about reclaiming my name, my father's work, my own dignity. Now my moves were deliberate. I dialed the PR firm we'd once hired for the Foundation using a blocked number. I didn't give my name, I gave them just enough. Upcoming governance concern involving Clara Caldwell. You might want to look into it. Then I hung up. In media, it's not about shouting first, it's about shaping the sequence. Timing and optics beat noise every time. Clara never understood that, but I do. I closed the laptop, staring at the sealed envelope on the desk. Everything I needed was in there. Names, transfers, dates, photos. I wasn't shaking, I wasn't angry. I was calm in a way that felt foreign but solid, because silence had stopped being my cage. Now it was my weapon. By the time she finds out, the cameras will already be on, and I'll be standing in the light she's been hoarding for years. The Creighton Systems boardroom was made of glass and polish, built for performance, not trust. I stepped inside that afternoon with the folder tucked under my arm, the one that held everything Clara thought I'd never find. The air conditioning hummed low, steady. My shoes echoed off the floors like I didn't belong. Clara didn't smile when she saw me, just nodded, as if I were a guest who'd overstayed his welcome. I didn't respond, just moved to the seat they tried to push me out of, third from the left, close enough to hear everything but just far enough to be forgotten. As I sat, I caught the edge of a whisper, 2 board members just behind me. He's just soft, not built for this kind of thing. I didn't flinch. Let them speak. Let them think what they want. I wasn't here to change their minds. I was here to correct the story. My hand brushed the folder again. My father's name, not just in memory but in legal ink, rested inside. I kept reminding myself over and over, this isn't about fury, it's about facts. The meeting began with Clara standing tall, smooth voice, practiced. We owe much of our stability to Tilden's leadership, she said, gesturing to her son like he was the second coming of charity itself. A slideshow flickered onto the screen. Photos, quotes, milestones. My name wasn't anywhere. The slide titled Founding Vision held 2 faces, hers and Tilden's. I stared at it. One of the older board members, Mr. Sanders, squinted. Wasn't Lowell part of the original plans? Clara smiled without blinking. We consolidated early sacrifices for unity, she said. Sacrifices. That's what I was now. A sacrifice. I didn't say a word, didn't blink, but I felt it in my gut. A twisting pressure like something pulling tight from the inside. Then came the moment she thought would bury me for good. Clara handed out copies of a final agreement, printed and bound. Her tone was clipped. We'll sign and move forward with this structure. Tilden will now officially be co-founder on all promotional and legal materials. I scanned the page. Near the bottom, faint but present, was my father's signature. Except it wasn't quite right. There was a slant missing, a dot too early, a curve that curved too much. It had been manipulated. I pulled my copy from the folder, compared it line by line. Same structure, different soul, and I knew this wasn't just a legal trick, this was forgery. Clara had masked it well, hidden the swap under the guise of updated branding, but the code was there, and I held the original. I waited, then stood. I won't sign what's been altered. This document betrays my father's wishes. She tilted her head like a curious cat. You should have known not to trust your own legacy, she said, voice soaked in venom, dressed up as Grace. The room fell into a kind of polite panic, eyes darting, chairs shifting, fake coughs, but I didn't raise my voice. I let the weight of that sentence hang, let it settle into the space where their loyalty should have been. And then I signed the acknowledgement line, just one, not the agreement, not the approval, just enough to mark my presence, just enough to say I'm not backing down, not today. Back at the hotel, I closed the curtains and turned off the TV. Quiet, just me and the light from the desk lamp. I opened my laptop, scanned recent activity logs tied to the foundation system, found file deletions, time-stamped at 2:47 a.m., 3 days ago, Clara's usual digital fingerprint. Then I opened the envelope again, read the fine print. My father had hidden contingency clauses, protections in case of mismanagement. Clara had hoped I'd never see it. I began drafting a press release. Creighton Foundation facing internal irregularities under review. Not the full story, just the spark. I knew exactly which journalist to send it to, one who owed me a favor. I didn't need a headline. I needed a question in the right room. And when I hit send, I felt something shift. The silence wasn't passive anymore. It was loaded. As the board applauded Tilden, my email to the press sent. The storm was already rising. I used my old badge. Still worked. No one had thought to deactivate it. Maybe they didn't think I'd come back. Or maybe they didn't care. The front lobby lights were dimmed, echoing with nothing but the hum of a half-powered security system. No receptionist, no cleaning crew. Just the ghost of what this place used to mean. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight toward the back archive, passing portraits of donors and founders, my father's picture still hanging, but noticeably lower than Clara's. I knew where the paper files were kept, where only the family had ever gone. It used to feel like legacy. Tonight it felt like crime scene cleanup. I found the folder labeled Original Charter, edges crisp, pages too white. I ran my hand over the cover, felt cold. When I opened it, the ink didn't even smell old. Then, in a separate folder nearby, a yellow post-it, my father's handwriting, faded but familiar. If anything happens, check the frame in my study. A simple note, but it hit like a hammer. He knew. Somehow he knew they'd do this. Swap out his words, reshape his intent, bury the truth under glossy paper and legal jargon. That charter wasn't the real one. It was a cleaned-up forgery for public show. The real one, if it still existed, was probably exactly where he left it. A memory broke through. Him, the night before he died, standing near the fireplace, holding his glass. He didn't say much, just looked up at the frame and muttered, "One day, you'll understand why I never took it down." I hadn't thought about that moment in years. Now, it felt like a signal from the grave. I turned off the lights, started to leave, and then I saw her, Clara, leaning against the glass wall near the exit, arms crossed, dressed down, but her eyes were sharp. She didn't flinch. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice someone tampering with history?" she said low, like a warning. I looked at her, calm, firm. "If history needs rewriting, I'll write it with ink that doesn't disappear." She stepped closer. "You always mistook silence for peace. It was compliance, and you were comfortable in it." I didn't answer. I walked past her, our shoulders brushed. She didn't stop me, just watched. That was the most unsettling part, how composed she stayed, like she still thought she had the upper hand. Back in the hotel, I didn't sleep. I laid everything out on the desk. Copies, notes, one freshly typed press release with a subject line that read, "Governance clarification pending." I emailed Mrs. Klein again, sent her the transfer record that clearly listed Chase. I didn't add commentary, just the document and the subject line, "Legacy theft, confirmed." I drafted the next memo. Short, sharp, formal request for board intervention. It was time to draw the line. No more waiting, no more warnings. I picked up my phone, called Ava, my cousin. We hadn't talked in a while, but she answered fast. Tech forensics was her thing. I told her what I needed: server logs, metadata, deletion trails. She sighed. "You know, once I dig into this, there's no undoing it." "I'm not looking to undo anything," I said. "I'm just tired of watching them pretend this never happened." "All right, send me what you've got." As I hung up, I stared at the framed photo on the hotel wall. Random stock art, some coastal bluff. The ocean looked endless, but even oceans have lines in the sand, places where tides stop, places you can stand and say, "No further." The truth isn't buried. It's just waiting for someone to open the right frame. I parked a block away and walked the rest on foot. The porch light was off, same as it always had been after midnight. That house had a rhythm, and I still remembered every beat. Under the third step, where the wood creaked but never cracked, was the spare key. My father never changed it. Said if someone wanted in bad enough, they'd find a way, and he'd rather they come through the front. The door didn't resist. Inside, the air was stale, thick with memory. I didn't bother turning on the lights. His study was just where I left it. Fireplace, dark green walls, the same chair with a rip in the armrest. He never got fixed. I stood in front of the framed charter above the mantel. My hands didn't shake, but my breath caught as I unhooked it. On the back, a false panel. Inside it, a folded document, heavy paper, worn edges, his handwriting in the margins, the original foundation charter. No edits, no lies, just his words, untouched. Then I saw it. A second envelope, sealed. My name in his writing. I broke the seal. Inside was a notarized letter, dated a year before his death, addressed to the board. Short, firm, final. Clara is not fit to carry on my legacy. If something happens to me, find my daughter. Daughter, not son. That letter wasn't for me, it was for Claire, the sister I'd stopped speaking to years ago. But that didn't sting. It clarified everything. He hadn't left this family blind. Clara buried his truth. I backed up the letter, the charter, every document, photos, digital copies, multiple clouds. I zipped the bag and turned to leave. Then I heard it. A car door, heels clicking, the front door opening. Clara. We met halfway down the hall. Her dress clung like wilted plastic, makeup smeared, wine on her breath. She knew. Maybe not what I found, but she knew I found something. Couldn't help yourself, could you? She muttered. You really thought it would stay buried forever? She tilted her head. You always thought truth was a sword. It's a noose, Lowell. You pull it wrong, you hang yourself. Then I guess it's time someone swings. She reached for her phone. I didn't stay. I walked out. Let her stew in silence. Hours later, back in my hotel, I found the door slightly ajar. My laptop gone. I didn't scream. I didn't panic. I picked up the phone and called Ava. They got in, I said. She didn't ask how. She just responded, don't use the cloud link. It's been pinged twice, anonymous VPN. So they were watching. Probably before I knew. At sunrise, I sat alone in a corner booth at a diner off Main Street. Pancakes in front of me going cold, coffee half sipped. In my hand, the last note from my dad, found in the charter folder, scribbled in the margin like an afterthought. Never let them teach you that loyalty means silence. A waiter, older guy, probably near 70, came by, saw my face. Bad morning? I shrugged. Just wondering? If it's all worth it. He nodded slowly. Sometimes you don't fight to win. You fight so someone sees you didn't give up. That sat heavy in my chest. Made sense in a way nothing else had lately. That afternoon, I met Mrs. Klein at a small cafe across from the courthouse, tucked booth in the back. No fanfare. I slid the flash drive across the table. This is everything, I said. She looked through it, eyes wide when she hit the letter. He made this decision years ago. Why didn't we know? Because Clara made sure of it. But now the board gets the full picture. We agreed to schedule the emergency meeting. 48 hours, every document will be laid bare. As I stepped out into the street, cool air hit my face like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I walked out of that cafe with fire in my lungs and ashes behind me. Let them come. I'm ready to burn the lies down. I walked into the ballroom late, escorted by 2 security men who pretended I was a VIP guest. The chandeliers shone bright. The polished floors glinted, and the air felt thick with expectation. Clara stood near the podium, smiling at guests, her applause mechanically timed. When she saw me, her lips curved briefly, and in that split second I saw fear. I carried the sealed envelope discreetly under my arm. Not many knew what it held, but I did. And tonight I intended to change the narrative. When Clara began speaking, she introduced Tilden first. My son, "The true legacy bearer," she said. The audience applauded. I remained seated. Flashbulbs popped, her composure flickered, whispers passed between guests. A few faces turned to look at me, expecting a reaction. Tilden addressed the room about growth, vision, stability. Then as he stepped aside, Clara nodded for me to speak. I stood slowly, unclasped the envelope, and let it rest on the podium. I looked around. The hush was noticeable. "You've erased me so many times," I said softly. "I'll let this speak for me." I opened the envelope. The cameras caught it, my voice firm, clear. "These are the documents my father wrote, not the ones she altered." Gasps rippled through the room. Then came the sound. The gala's live feed switched. Jelia's face appeared on screens. Her finger hovered, then pressed play. Clara's own voice echoed through the room. "He doesn't deserve this. I took control for the good of the company." The shock hit like a wrecking ball. Tilden's face drained. Clara's veneer cracked. I continued over the feed. "You called me soft. I call this truth." Suddenly guests rose. Murmurs swelled. Phones lifted. Clara's brother stood yelling, "Stop the broadcast." But the crew held fast. Board members looked uncertain, exchanging glances. One older board member boldly stood and asked Clara, "Why hide this from us? Explain yourself." Clara faltered. Words tangled. The legacy she controlled unraveled in front of the very people she'd courted. Inside me, the storm was calm. I replayed my father's words. "When the truth is ready, even silence will roar." I took questions. Every clause quoted from the charter. Guests nodded. Some leaned forward, whispering, "He was right all along." My conviction no longer hidden. This was my moment. Before I left the stage, I handed the original charter to Mrs. Klein and the lead auditor. "The rest is in your hands," I said. Backstage, I passed Clara in a dim hallway. She tried a final jab. "You'll regret this." I didn't slow down. "Only the truth is regretful to the guilty," I murmured. Her eyes flickered. The murmurs trailed behind me as I walked out into the night. I slipped into the after-party adjoining the main hall, still wearing the same dark suit from the gala, but with my tie loosened. The air was heavier here, thick with perfume and champagne. Guests talked loudly over soft jazz, unaware that the real show was minutes away. Clara caught my eye across the room, her smile tight, almost brittle, like glass under pressure. Tilden stood at the bar, bragging to a group of donors about the new direction for the foundation as though nothing had happened out there. I scanned the lighting rigs, camera crews, and security positions. This wasn't just a party, this was a stage, and I had walked onto it ready to fight on my terms. A staffer approached with a clipboard and handed me the guest list. My name wasn't there, not as Lowell, not even as guest. Instead, a small line read, "Observer." I held the page up, looking straight at Clara. "What's this?" I asked, my voice even but sharp enough to cut through the chatter. She laughed lightly, a sound more like a cough. "A printing error," she said. But several VIPs near us turned their heads. They weren't fooled. I folded the list slowly and tucked it into my jacket. Intentional degradation, public and casual, one of her oldest tactics. Tonight, it would backfire. Burrell, the lounge manager, walked out from behind the bar looking nervous. He pulled a small recorder from his vest and pressed play. Clara's voice filled the room. It had to be him erased or my reputation collapses. Gasps rippled across the crowd. Tilden blinked rapidly, glancing between his mother and me. I stood still, letting the recording echo off marble walls. People weren't sipping champagne anymore. They were staring at her like she was a stranger. Clara moved fast, signaling the AV crew to cut the feed, but the technicians refused. Press cameras were already rolling. Phones were already out. Tilden entered late from another room, stumbling, as though someone had kept him there on purpose. I realized he was a pawn too. delayed so the broadcast would fracture at exactly the moment her secret spilled. Now the chaos was public, and it belonged to her. I walked to the dais with the original charter in my hand. "This is my father's will," I said clearly. "Not your rewrite?" I placed it on the podium so every lens could see. The live feed zoomed in on Clara's face, and a visible shift rolled through the audience. Eyes, murmurs, movement like a tide turning. One board member stood and said loudly, "We demand a recount of votes." An assistant stepped forward, pulling down the founder's plaque. With shaking hands, he held a new one up, this time my name engraved beside my father's. Clara retreated backstage, shoulders hunched. Tilden didn't follow her. He stood off to the side, hollow and pale. I looked at Mrs. Klein, at Ava, both of them holding themselves upright like pillars. Guests began clustering around me, some congratulatory, some apologetic. I didn't gloat. Instead, I said quietly, "Let the truth lead now." The cameras stayed locked on me, recording every breath. As the lights dimmed in the ballroom, my phone buzzed. It was Burl. "They've just locked the server. Be ready." I woke before sunrise in the guest room of my father's lakeside house, now legally mine after last night's resolution. The quiet felt foreign. For months, my mornings had been full of noise, lawyers, meetings, threats. Now there was only the creak of the dock and a thin fog rolling off the water. I brewed black coffee in the old tin pot he used and sat on the porch, staring at the still surface. It was strange how everything had escalated from that flight when Clara first cornered me. The captain's calm voice, her mask of charm, it all looked different in hindsight. "When you know your value," I muttered to myself, "you stop entertaining people who don't." The sun broke over the tree line, and for the first time in years, my shoulders dropped without me forcing them to. Ava showed up just after 7 with a paper bag of breakfast sandwiches and a cautious look. We sat side by side on the deck steps, our knees brushing against old wood my father had nailed decades ago. She broke the silence first. "I should have asked more questions sooner," she said, eyes fixed on the lake. "Not because I doubted you, but because I was scared of what I'd find." Her voice cracked a little. I shook my head. "You've always seen me as a person, not a threat. That's enough." She smiled faintly. We opened one of the old photo albums my father had hidden in a trunk. Yellowed pictures spilled out. My first bike, his medals, Ava at family picnics. Seeing it all again didn't ache like it used to. It felt like being handed back pieces of a self I'd lost. Mid-morning, my lawyer arrived with a thick envelope. Clara's name was on it. Inside were legal documents and a letter written in her hand. I read it slowly. She wrote about envy, about being the outsider who married into a legacy she never felt part of. "I feared you were always the real heir," she confessed. "I tried to erase you because I thought that was the only way I could survive." I didn't feel anger, just recognition. Hurt people hurt people. Some punishments live deeper than any courtroom. I folded the letter and set it aside. I told the lawyer to proceed with the foundation's restructuring, but to drop any criminal charges against her. Closure didn't have to look like a headline. Later, I walked the garden trail where my father used to jog, his old dog tags swinging in my hand. I remembered the last real conversation we had. "You're sharper than they think," he'd said. "That's your power." The words felt different now. I wasn't fighting anymore. I was holding. I stopped under the big oak by the boathouse and whispered, "Dad, I did it with grace." The breeze off the lake felt like an answer, not victory, just weightlessness. By noon, I was back inside making calls. The foundation board convened on a secure line. I announced I would donate half my shares to fund scholarships for veterans' children. "Let legacy not just be blood, but choice," I said, and this time no one cut me off. The community response was immediate. Headlines shifted from family drama to quiet dignity. At the first scholarship meeting, a woman hugged me and whispered, "You just showed the country how healing looks." I didn't have a reply. I just held her hand. Invitations started arriving. A leadership summit for women in philanthropy wanted me to speak. I began outlining a memoir, not about scandal, but about survival and what it takes to stay whole. On my father's desk now sits a new photograph. Him, me, Ava, all smiling at a picnic. It's the image I choose to end with. I leave the past rippling on the lake and step into sunlight. I didn't reclaim a name, I rebuilt its meaning. And as I stood in that quiet house, my phone buzzed again. A letter had arrived, signed by someone I thought was long gone.